Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. Today I'm going to talk to you about the question, what if public education never existed? The reason that I came up with this idea is because it's back to school time, and most people seem to be celebrating it. Parents, at least, not always the kids. But most people tend to look at the public education system as being as American as apple pie, and they truly believe that our society would not be what it is today without the public education system. And I do have to agree with that aspect of it. Society would not be what it is today without the public education system. But I don't mean that in a good way. So most people don't really realize what life was like before the public education system. And I'm not going to pretend that it was an easy life. And we're going to get into some things about that. But right now, I think it's important to point out that we only see what life is like now because we have been in school, our parents have been in school, our grandparents have been in school, and it has been going on for generations, to the fact that we really have no memory at all of what life was like before the government decided to step in and threaten police force if you do not send your kids to school. So let's just do a little mental exercise today, because I'm hoping to maybe shed some light to some of you who don't really understand what I have so against public education, so you can see the difference that it has made in our lives, and not in a good way. So before public education system started, kids worked with their families. They worked with their communities. They were seen as valuable members of society. They worked together on the family farm, the family homestead. They helped to make the things for their houses. They helped make soap. They helped churn butter, milk cows, make clothing, build houses. And again, this was all something that was done within a community, and people were very, very self-sufficient at the time. Everybody knew that they had value. Everybody knew, including children, that they had a place in society. They had something worth doing. They really mattered. And what we're seeing today with the public education system is that's not the case with kids anymore. And unfortunately, once kids graduate and grow up, it's no longer the case with adults anymore. Kids who are in school nowadays, they don't understand what it means to do something that is going to have meaning in the long run. They don't know what it's like to be a contributing member of society. They sit in school at a desk for 6 hours a day, basically getting told by their superiors, you must do this, you must do that, you must listen to what I say, obey authority, this is what you have to memorize, no, don't think on your own, I want you just to remember what you need to do. School has completely depleted our population's sense of free thinking for themselves. So, let's go back even further than right before the public education system. Let's go back to the American Revolution. Our forefathers were here fighting against the British. They would do anything to see to it that our country was a free country. They did not want King George to walk all over them, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get this country, or the colonies at the time, to a point that they were free. Move ahead a few years, when compulsory schooling was actually instituted, there were families who actually were fighting against compulsory schooling with bearing arms. They were not willing to let their kids go to the government schools for 6 hours a day. They fought against it tooth and nail because they saw that it was literally the unlawful taking of their children by the government and putting them in a building. And today we've basically been conditioned by these schools to not think in that way anymore. We are so conditioned to just obey authority, do what the government tells you to do, that even when we see things like bullying and school shootings and sexual assaults in schools and bulletproof backpacks, we still can't see past that to the point where you realize, maybe this school thing isn't such a good idea after all. We're still so conditioned that we still think that it's a good thing. What has happened to fighting for our children? And you know what? It's not just that. Let's just think about, what would life be like today if there was no such thing as public education? And this is all speculation on my part, but when you look back to the fact that kids were being raised as being productive members of society, what that means to me is that you would not have a generation of kids who are unable to communicate with others, who are unable to communicate with their elders. We would not have a generation of older people who look down on children or teenagers especially, as being not worth their time. We would not be looking at a generation of kids who no longer know how to entertain themselves. They have their faces stuck in their screens all day long. They cannot think anymore. We have a generation of children who are perpetual children. Back before compulsory education, it was usually around 13 that kids really started getting, serious about helping out with the family. Now, of course, before that, kids were helping too. And again, I am never going to say that that was an easy life that they had, but it was a rewarding life, and they found out how important it is to be a hard worker. There are so many people in society today who don't know what it means to truly work for what you have. We are living in a life filled with consumerism. This consumerism mentality was indoctrinated into us from the public school system. Why? Because the public school system was instituted to create factory workers for the industrial age. They wanted workers, and they wanted people who would buy their goods. And they did a heck of a job doing it, because we are at the point today, nobody knows how to do anything anymore. I am a wife. I have 11 kids, and can I tell you a secret? I don't know how to sew a button onto a piece of clothing. Is it something that I have to figure out how to do? Yes, but something like that generations ago would have been unheard of, because children were always surrounded by real life learning. They weren't just brainwashed into this mindset that learning can only happen in a box of a building. And the whole focus on what learning has to look like and what learning is all about, that wasn't something that people were constantly talking about all the time, because they knew that their children were picking up the life experiences that they knew by actually being with their families, being with their communities, learning hands-on tasks that would help them as they got older and would continue in that lifestyle. They would do apprenticeships. They would have mentors. They would not be sitting in a building for 6 hours doing papers and then homework that mean absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. So without school today, if there were never such a thing as public education, I honestly see that we would be a country of entrepreneurs. We would not be a country of consumers who are no longer able to do anything for themselves. We would be a country filled with confident people, because what is one thing that school does to a lot of kids? It depletes their confidence. It completely lowers their self-esteem, because they are categorized. And if they don't fit the model, the in-the-box model that school wants for their students, they know about it. And, there might be some good teachers who care about these kids, but the fact is, those good teachers who care about these kids, they can't do anything about what that school model is really like. Okay? So these kids are stigmatized. They have no self-esteem. Without school, I truly believe that we would have self-confident people, because they would have had the opportunity to see what they can do. They would have had the opportunity to go for the things that interested them, the things that they were good at, the ways in which they knew that they could help other people. That's how I see our society as it would look if there was no such thing as public school. We would not be cut off from one another. we would still be a community. We would be getting along. We would not have this huge divide that we have right now. You know, we have between left and right and black and white. It's crazy. Whatever happened to community? I will tell you what happened to community. School happened to community. It took children out of society and began raising them set apart from life as it truly was. So they no longer knew how important that was. And so I know that I'm going to get people who are saying, what about child labor laws? School helped kids, you know, they saved kids from child labor. Well, there are a few issues that I have with that. First of all, to take kids out of one factory and put them into another type of factory, the school factory, and then to require it by law and then not even pay these kids for that time in that school factory, that is not an answer to child labor laws. On top of that, I'm reading a book right now by John Taylor Gatto. It's called Weapons of Mass Instruction, and I've read it before, and I'm rereading it because it's so good. But there was actually a study done, or a survey of children who were taken out of the factories and put in public education. And after they were in these schools for a while, they were asked about it. The majority of the children said that they would rather be in those factories. Why? Again, I'm only speculating, but I'm thinking, could it have something to do with they felt their worth in those factories? They might not have been getting paid much, but they were getting paid, and they were creating something that they knew was helping others. Things that were making them, again, productive members of society. Were they underpaid? Yes. But I really don't think like a lot of people in this day and age. I don't think that government is the answer to everything. So I truly believe that over time, we would have worked it out. We would have figured out, you know what, kids probably shouldn't be in this situation. And when kids are old enough, they certainly deserve more, pay than what they're getting. But instead, the government decided to step in. And as always, they had a very, very, very imperfect response to the problem. So they took one problem and created an even bigger problem, the school. And so that actually leads into something else that I know people are going to say. But what about kids who have, bad home lives, who have broken families? What about them? Well, you know what? I truly lay a lot of the blame for that on the public education system. I truly believe school is the root of the problems that we have with family today. Because again, kids were ripped out of their homes, put in schools, okay? So their parents are no longer raising them. They are being taught values contrary to what their parents might raise them with, and they no longer have that connection with family that they would have had before that. Moving along, we had women's lib, in which people started telling wives, it's not worth it to be a housewife. It's not worth it to just be a mother. You deserve to get out there and earn some money and be in the workforce. And of course, having kids in school gave them the perfect opportunity for that. It was free babysitting. So these mothers, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like what I have to say, but this is how I see it. So a lot of these mothers left their homes, not necessarily like leaving them as in divorcing and everything, but I'm saying I don't even know the proper terminology, but they gave up on just being a wife and a mother, and they left the home to pursue careers. And then what ended up happening was the kids were then not only left to be raised by the schools, but then a lot of times they would come home and be latchkey kids, or they would be going to daycares, or they would be going to different areas that they were not being raised by their parents anymore. They no longer had this nuclear family that kids do need to develop. They need to have that support. So then we started seeing the rise in crime, the rise in divorce, because I'm sure that women being out in the workforce and then having the problems with the kids, I'm sure it caused some problems in the marriage. So then we have the rise in divorce. And you know what? I'm honestly going to tell you right now that I forgot what I was going to tell you right now. Isn't that funny? Okay. But the fact of the matter is that yes, school is the reason that there are so many problems with families. That is the reason that parents don't know how to parent. They were not raised in a community. They were raised in networks. They weren't raised with people properly modeling to them what a family, what being a parent looks like. They didn't have that support that is desperately needed. So if public education never existed, I'm going to wager that there would be far, far less families who are abusive and who are neglectful and who are broken. Honestly, that's how I see it. Do I imagine that the world would be a utopian society if school never existed? Of course not. We're humans. Nothing is perfect. But I can tell you that now I remember what I was going to say before. I truly believe that the whole notion of separating kids from their families, that was always intended from the very beginning. It might have been a long process, but I truly believe that was intended. Because when it comes down to it, there are people even today who believe that parents should not have control over their children, but that children should be wards of the state. There are people who actually believe that. And that is what I believe. Actually, that is what I know. A lot of the people who came up with this whole compulsory school system, that's what they wanted. So this whole catastrophe since the public education system could have been avoided if more parents would have taken up arms and refused to send their kids to school. And, is there anything that we can do about it now? I don't know. Like I said, it was just a mental exercise today. And while homeschooling is certainly legal now, it is my biggest fear, maybe not my biggest fear, but it is one of my biggest fears, that the government is finally going to put their foot down and say, you know what? We don't like the fact that we've lost control of this many kids. We need to start really tightly regulating the homeschool community. I truly believe that that is what is going to happen, because I think that when they legalized homeschooling, I think they just saw it as like a freak movement that was not going to last. It has lasted. There are, I think, about 3.5 million kids being homeschooled in the U.S. alone right now. So that is the one thing that you as a parent can do, is rescue your child from the public education system. Raise your child in your family. Educate your child in your family. As a community. As a whole unit. Because honestly, I don't really think that education and living life needs to be separated. Kids who are given purpose, kids who are given a reason to do what they have to do, they are learning all the time. Their wheels are constantly turning, and they are always going to be coming up with ideas on what they can do to help others next. That is what I see our country as, what it might have looked like, what might have been, which is sad. But again, I don't know what there is we can do about it today. This was just my way of maybe illustrating to you what school has truly done to us. It's not good. It might be as American as apple pie, but apple pie is much, much better. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one in the description box below. And if you like what I'm doing and would like to, support me in any way, I encourage you to go visit me on Patreon and see what kinds of rewards I have in store for you there. And I hope you have a great day.